Stranger Things Season 1 was more than just a show, it was an experience. From the moment those synths hit, I was locked in. Hi guys, my name's Barry and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be diving into Stranger Things Season 1 in the lead up to Season 5 that's coming out at the end of the year. I'm going to tell you why I think this season was pure perfection, from the casting, the emotion, the mystery, the heartbreak, and everything in between. If we start off with the casting for this show, because from the adults to the children, I think everybody was absolutely perfect. From Winona Ryder as Joyce to David Harbour as Hopper, both of them as the two lead adults were absolutely amazing. Very similar to the casting from Stephen King's It from 2017. It feels like the casting for Stranger Things was like lightning in a bottle. Mike, Dustin, Lucas, Will, and of course Eleven, they felt so natural, like children from the early to the mid 1980s. And I do mention this quite a lot when you see a movie like The Monster Squad from 1987. It's about a group of kids who were actually kids from the 1980s. When you see a film like The Goonies, yes, they do feel like real kids, but they don't really talk the way kids did back in the mid to the late 80s. Whereas in a movie like The Monster Squad and a show like Stranger Things, they spoke exactly like we did back in the 80s and the 90s.
That's discrimination, jerkoid. Prescriptions drugs, which you're on if you think you're getting up here.
I love how the kids weren't really scared of the Demogorgon and anything that was happening in the show, and it was all thanks to their love of Dungeons and Dragons. Because they were children, they didn't really know the dangers that was in front of them, but because they were children, they were blinded by that innocence. If we look at the 80s vibe and aesthetic to the show, again, it was absolutely amazing. It wasn't just one of those shows that was set in the 80s and were throwing things at you to say, ha, this is the 80s because it's got that car, it's got that board game. No, they don't do it like that. This felt so authentic. You see the bikes, the clothes, the technology that they used, everything felt amazing. It takes me back to, this is so random, but it takes me back to an 80s party that I had back in 2007. I threw an 80s party for me and my friends. I had this flat, this apartment, and I said, right, it's an 80s party. And people came, about 95% of my guests came dressed as an 80s character. But that's not the kind of party that I was looking for. I think I was one of the only people that came dressed as someone that looked like they were dressed in the 1980s. I had an 80s shirt on, 80s trousers, 80s trainers, whereas everybody else was dressed in the modern world just as an 80s character. It's really hard to explain, but that's what a lot of movies today do, where they give us movies that are supposed to be set in the 80s, but they're just showing us things from the 80s. But genuinely, Stranger Things felt like it was shot in the 80s. One of the most intriguing aspects of the show was Papa, the scientists, and that Hawkins Lab, because it did feel like one of those scientific places that you would see in a 1980s sci-fi movie. It's full of mystery, a lot of things that you don't know about, and a lot of things you don't even learn about throughout the entire show. Yes, we learn more about the Hawkins Lab as the seasons go on, but if this was a one and done show, there was a lot that was left out, but it's something that we would have accepted because we were so focused on the kids and their parents and stuff that the lab played a secondary character. If you've been a subscriber of my channel for a while, you will know that one of my favourite genres of music is that synthwave music that I listen to all the time. Bands like The Strike, The Midnight, all those types of bands, that's the kind of music I listen to. So when Stranger Things came out and we got that synth score, it didn't feel like those copycat music that you get in these shows. It did feel totally original. So I love not just the music at the beginning of Stranger Things, but the score throughout was fantastic. And they also used music throughout the show that really represented the mid to the early 1980s. When we look back at the characters, yes, of course, the kids are our favourite characters, but when you look at the adults for this show, especially season one, The depth really shows throughout the entire season. You've got Joyce, who is a desperate single mother trying to find her son, and the way that Winona Ryder acts this season out was unbelievable. Winona Ryder wasn't known for being one of the best actresses of all time, and she certainly isn't the best actress of all time in this show, but there's something about this show in this season in particular that just showcases Winona Ryder's talents. She did genuinely feel like that mother who had lost a son and didn't know what to do. And then you look at David Harbour's Hopper, he was unbelievable as well. He was in bit parts in movies leading up to Stranger Things. This was his breakout role, and you get to see the grief within his character throughout the entire show. And then it's that last episode when we get really deep down into the backstory of him, his wife, and his daughter that he lost, Sarah, to what we can only guess is cancer, and the way they showcased that throughout the show, building up his character right to the very last episode, where he's not just fighting for the memory of Sarah, he's fighting for other people now who are potentially losing their children, most notably Joyce, who could potentially lose Will. So he's using that anger and grief in his performance, and wow, absolutely amazing. There are characters for everyone in this one, and you've got Nancy, Steve and Jonathan who play the older teens in this show. So you've got young kids, you've got teenagers, and you've got adults. So I feel like there's some character for everyone. And if I had to choose my favourite out of Nancy, Jonathan and Steve, even this early on, I still believe Steve was my favourite because he had the character arc from the beginning. He looked like that typical jock who you didn't think you were going to like, and then as the show progressed you started to like Steve a little bit more until a lot of bad things started happening and you're thinking, nah, I prefer Jonathan over Steve, and then Steve becomes a hero in the end. So all the characters were great. There was just a few that maybe stood out a little bit more for me, and Steve was one of them. The Upside Down was both terrifying yet mysterious because we find out a lot about it for us to be scared. Not for us, but for the characters, especially the young kids. But there's a lot that we don't find out that keeps it mysterious as well and makes you want more for more seasons that come ahead. They didn't over-explain the Upside Down, which I liked. They didn't explain too much about the Upside Down's connection to the Demogorgons, to Papa, to 11. Everything was quite a mystery even after the end of the show. The season is 9 years old now, and when you look at the CGI from season 1 to season 4, it progressed a little bit better after every season. Obviously they had more money to spend as well, so the CGI was a little iffy at times, but I think they hid a lot of the bad CGI in the dark and the fog and stuff like that. And although that's intentional to try and make the CGI look better, it also was aesthetically pleasing as well, because not only did they try and hide some of the bad CGI, the way they did it was actually really well done, because again, it's a show that's set in the 80s, and then when you see those mystical beings in the background in the fog, yeah, I think it worked. This is the first time watching season 1 since I first watched it back in 2016. So it has been 9 years since I watched this show, and every episode, I remembered every episode, but it still was quite surprising as I was watching it, especially that finale, because I forgot how emotional it was. Yes, season 4 was very emotional, but I think the drawback from season 2 and 3, which were still good, we will get on to those, they were still good, but they weren't as emotionally gut-wrenching as season 1 and 4. But because it had been so long since seeing the finale of season 1, I was completely taken aback by how emotional it was. But from the kids losing their best friend, to Joyce possibly losing her son, to finding out Hopper's backstory with Sarah, it was all an emotional gut punch for me anyway. And the finale was just that massive build-up, so I was pleasantly surprised, all over again. I feel like the reason it works so well is because it balances that mystery, the horror, comedy, the deep emotional storytelling without ever feeling like it was messy and convoluted. I loved those themes of friendship, loss, trauma, bravery. It was about more than just that monster that came from the Upside Down. I feel like you can watch season 1 again and again and always find something new, a new clue, details, a line that hits harder now than it did the first time you watched it as well. Stranger Things season 1 wasn't just good, it was iconic. A perfect perfect blend of heart, horror, and nostalgia. So, what was your favourite moment, if you liked Stranger Things, that is? What was your favourite moment from season 1? I feel like the finale for me was my favourite. As heartbreaking as it was, I think my favourite moment was when Hopper was trying to resuscitate Will and he was thinking about his own daughter, Sarah, dying at the same time. It's very gut wrenching, but that was probably my favourite moment. But as always, guys, leave your thoughts and opinions down below. Let me know what you think. Thanks a lot for watching. Thanks for subscribing, and I'll see you soon.
I'll be right back.
What are you waiting for, huh?
Coming to get you, Barbara.
Ever played Skin the Cat?
Someone's in